the Sayyids, the Zaydis, the Naqvis. When your name says you're not Indian, how can you be an Indian? When your name says you're actually an Arab, how can you integrate with India?
Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back. Recently, Tarek Fatah did a video editorial for the New Delhi Times entitled "Who Caused the Delhi Riots?" This is in reference to riots that took place in northeast Delhi in India in February of this year, 2020. In that video, Tarek Fatah makes some very irresponsible, some very dangerous statements which can potentially further endanger the lives of Indian Muslims. In this video, I will be responding to some of the statements that Tarek Fatah made in that video. Stay tuned. Okay, so the background to this story of the recent Delhi riots between Muslims and Hindus in India is that the BJP, which is a right-wing, ultra-nationalist Hindu government of India, they recently passed some legislation called the CAA. That's the Citizenship Amendment Act. And according to that piece of legislation, refugee claimants or asylum seekers from nearby countries to India can be fast-tracked in the process of being given Indian citizenship. And that legislation explicitly mentions persecuted Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, but it fails to mention Muslims. And Muslims, of course, are the largest religious minority in India. So Indian Muslims and Muslims around the world and human rights activists around the world criticized Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP government, saying, why is it that Muslims have been left out? Why is it that Muslim refugees have not been mentioned? Now, the response to this from the BJP government can be that it's mostly members of other religious minorities who are persecuted in the neighboring countries surrounding India, because all of those countries are basically majority Muslim. So Bangladesh and Pakistan and Afghanistan are majority Muslim. And so the chances of there being a persecuted Muslim minority coming from those countries is not very real. The response to that is that nonetheless, even if that is true, the legislation did not have to be worded in sectarian language. It didn't have to explicitly mention members of all the other religions and leave out Muslims only. Rather, refugees could have been looked at on a case-by-case individual basis, and the government could assess whether their refugee claim or their asylum claim is authentic, whether it's genuine or not. The other point is that there are genuine Muslim refugees who can come from those other countries. So for example, the Rohingya Muslims, who we hear a lot about in the former Burma in Myanmar, have been very harshly persecuted by the majority Buddhists of that country. So many of them have fled Burma. Bangladesh can only take a certain number of them in, and many of them are even trying to pass through Bangladesh looking for greener pastures in India. Also, there could be political refugees from Muslim countries. There's the Hazara tribe, which is an ethnic minority in Afghanistan. They also happen to be Shia Muslims, which is the minority denomination of Islam. So these people can be genuine refugee claimants in India, and yet the CAA legislation has left them completely out. So this is what led to a wave of protests, which was led mainly by Muslim students from Aligarh Muslim University in India, as well as Jamia Millia Islami in India. But these protests were also joined by many Hindus, by many Christians, by Sikhs, and in general, even by secular Hindus who are concerned about the dangerous direction and the sectarian direction that India is headed towards. So Indians of all stripes, of all varieties, of all religious backgrounds, who are concerned with preserving the justice and fairness of the Indian state, who are concerned with preserving the secular nature of Indian government, have risen up in protests. The timing of these protests, along with some road blockades in Delhi, India, coincided with the visit of US President Donald Trump, who came to Delhi to meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And it's at that point that a lot of these protests changed into riots, especially when Hindu militias went on the offensive, with the Delhi police either idly standing by or in some cases even joining in to help these Hindu radicals attack innocent Muslims in Delhi. It's in this context that all of these events took place, And now let's look at some of the comments that Tariq Fatah made. And it's worth noting that the New Delhi Times released two versions of this video called Who Caused the Delhi Riots by Tariq Fatah. One is an English version which runs for about 12 minutes. And then there's the Hindi version which runs about 14 minutes. And of course, the time length of the two videos cannot perfectly coincide exactly. But it is interesting that Tariq Fatah said a couple of extra controversial things in the Hindi version, probably because he knows that Muslims do not have the Muslim equivalent of memory. In other words, there is unfortunately no Muslim organization that keeps tabs, that watches anti-Islam videos on YouTube which are in different languages and then translates them into English, exposing them to the wider English audience. So this might be why Tariq Fatah took the liberty to say a couple of extra things in the Hindi version which he didn't say in the English. For that reason, I'm going to be toggling between the English and mainly the Hindi version of his video. Now, Tariq Fatah begins both his English and his Hindi video by sounding like a well-wisher of the Indian Muslim community. He's simply giving them advice, saying, do not be provocative, do not do anything which goes against your interests and the interest of Indian society. So he sounds very innocent, like a well-wisher of the Indian Muslim community. As we will see, some of the things that he says goes very much directly against the interests of Indian Muslims, and in fact even further endangers them by saying things which would only further incite and inflame the passions of the Hindu right wing. Let's have a look.
मुझे पूरा यकीन है हर गाड़ी के अंदर जो बैठा था उसने ये ज़रूर कहा होगा दिल में कि क्या मुसीबत है, ये क्या है जिस कानून से किसी हिंदुस्तान के मुसलमान पे ज़र्रा भर फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा.
So in this clip, Tariq Fatah was expressing his sympathy for other people in Delhi who had to suffer inconveniences due to these roadblocks. As we will see, he shows more sympathy to drivers who had to be inconvenienced on the road as opposed to Muslims who were killed, hacked to death, and burnt to death in these riots, in which a total of at least 53 people died, of which the vast majority, about 40 or more, were Muslims. Fatah also said in this clip that this law, he's referring to the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, he said this does not make an iota of a difference or an impact on any Indian Muslim. As I've mentioned already, not only does this impact on Indian Muslims, but it should impact and it should concern every Indian who is concerned with preserving the secular nature of Indian laws and Indian government. The other thing is the CAA can directly adversely impact on Indian Muslims. And the reason for that is because many Muslim businesses and homes were completely destroyed, looted, and set on fire during the Delhi riots. I remember watching a video of one Indian man who was crying, saying that he's lost everything, including all of his documents, all of his land ownership papers, everything has been burnt. If that Indian man tomorrow were asked by the government to produce his citizenship papers or to show his Indian passport to prove that he's an Indian citizen, he would not be able to do it. So what would happen to someone like that now? Would he get thrown into a detention camp, which the BJP is apparently planning on creating? We don't know. That man doesn't know. And so these are the kinds of worries. This is the kind of anxiety and stress that many Indian Muslims are going through.
उसकी वजह से सड़कें बंद की हुई और एक जगह नहीं, हिंदुस्तान में कई जगह बड़े इंतजाम से. और सेकुलरिज्म की बात करने वाले वो लोग जिनकी यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम है जामिया मिल्ली इस्लामी, जामिया मिल्ली हिंद नहीं, जामिया मिल्ली इस्लामी.
So now we began to see that rather than being a well-wisher of the Indian Muslim community, which he pretends to be at the beginning, Tariq Fatah is actually throwing more oil on the fire here. He's actually trying to inflame the heated passions of the Hindu majority even more. In this clip, Tariq Fatah was criticizing the fact that one of the major and very prestigious universities, Muslim universities of India, which is called Jamia Milli Islami, that it's called Jamia Milli Islami. In other words, it's called the Islamic University, to make it simple. And it's not called Jamia Milli Hind. It's not called the Indian University or the University of India. So the fact that this university has the name Islamic in it now becomes a point of criticism for Tariq Fatah. But is Fatah consistent in the way that he applies his criticism? Would he apply this same criticism to members of other religious minorities in India. For example, what would Fatah do with the name of Kolkata Hindu School in Calcutta in South India? Would he say that they should take the name of Hindu out and put in the name of India instead? What about Central Hindu School in Gorakhpur in Uttar Pradesh? Should they take the name of Hindu out of their school? What about Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi? Should they take the name Hindu out of their university? And there's Hindu College, which is right at the University of Delhi in Delhi. There's Hindu College in Moradabad. And I'm sure that there's a long list of private schools, colleges, and universities that have the name Hindu in it. Now, this is where Tariq Fatah becomes a populist, and he would probably say, well, Hindus are the majority religion in India, so he would make the case of Hindu exceptionalism. They can have the name Hindu in their college or university, but a Muslim shouldn't have the name of Muslim or Islamic in their colleges or in their universities. But what about back in Canada, which is where Tariq Fatah is from? What about the Mississauga Hindu School in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada? Would Tariq Fatah go to the Mississauga Hindu School and say, listen, you should take the name Hindu out of your school and just call it Mississauga Canadian School, or at least Mississauga Hindus in Canada School, or something like that? No, he won't do that. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there are members of other religious minorities in India that have the name of their religion or their religious personalities in the names of their school. So for example, Guru Gobind Singh University is in Delhi. That's named after one of the gurus of the Sikh religion, not of the Hindu religion. What about Madras Christian College in Chennai in South India? What about Christ University in Bangalore? Would Tariq Fatah say that Christ University should be called India University instead of Christ University? And what about other institutional relics from the colonialist era, like Scottish Church College? Does that sound very Indian to you? What about Mount Zion College in Tamil Nadu? I don't imagine Tariq Fatah criticizing the name Mount Zion. Don't you think the name should be changed to maybe Mount Everest or something a bit more South Asian? The list goes on and on. There's St. John's College in Agra. There's the Mennonite Brethren Bible College. This is in India. Should they change their name as well? What about Scott Christian College? How Indian does the name Scott sound to you? What about Martin Luther Christian University? This is a college in India as well. This is named after a German Protestant reformer who was actually complicit in the killing of many European Jews. Should all of these names be changed to more Indic or more Sanskrit Indian sounding names?
Number 2 question. How did the Intelligence Bureau officer, 26-year-old, what's his name? Ankit Sharma. How did he get identified? He was a plainclothes officer. Who identified him in the crowd? Who picked him up? Who stabbed him 400 times and then dumped him in a gutter?
Here Tariq Fatah refers to one of the very unfortunate incidents of these Delhi riots, in which a plainclothes intelligence police officer named Ankit Sharma was killed. Now, according to the story on Ankit Sharma in the Washington Times, there was not one mob, but there were 2 mobs that were present, because in the very vicinity of the street on which Ankit Sharma lives, there was also a Hindu mob that was chanting Shri Ram. So it's important to mention that there wasn't just one crowd, there were 2 mobs. There was a Muslim as well as a Hindu mob, and who knows in the ensuing chaos what exactly happened to Ankit Sharma, we don't know. Now, if you watch the rest of the video, which I'm not going to be showing you all of it, but one of the most dangerous implications that Tariq Fatah makes in the video is what he's trying to say is that how would a Muslim mob have known, assuming the Muslim mob killed him, assuming the Muslim mob specifically targeted Ankit Sharma, not just because he was a Hindu passerby, but because they knew specifically that he was an Indian intelligence officer. Assuming all of those things, Tariq Fatah is asking the question that how would this Muslim mob know that this plainclothes officer was actually a police officer? What he implies later on is basically that this was a foreign intelligence agency that was involved in informing the Muslim crowd that this Ankit Sharma was a plainclothes intelligence officer and IB officer. This is one of the most dangerous things that you can say. When you say this, you are playing with the lives of Muslims, because one of the most popular anti-Muslim polemics in India from the Hindu majority is that the Muslim minority is not to be trusted and that they are actually pawns that are being used by Pakistan. Pakistan, of course, being the arch enemy of India. So Fateh is implying, or he's insinuating, that Pakistan was involved in inciting the Delhi riots and specifically in informing the Delhi Muslims that Ankit Sharma is actually an intelligence officer. He should be targeted and killed. And this is one of the most dangerous things that Tarek Fatah could say. When you say something like that, you are helping to seal the fate of India's Muslims by making them look unpatriotic, by making them look like they are cheerleaders for Pakistan or pawns that are being used by Pakistan to either destabilize India or to try to take over India or something like that. As we've seen from a previous video that I did on Tarek Fatah, when it comes to numbers, Tarek Fatah really likes to play around. He's not a fan of precision or accuracy. And when he says that Ankit Sharma was stabbed 400 times, this 400 stabs only adds to the idea that Ankit Sharma must have been target killed. I mean, this is personal. Even in the midst of a riot, you don't stab someone 400 times unless there's some serious heat, some serious hatred that is involved. So this adds to the idea that the Muslims target killed Ankit Sharma because they knew he was an intelligence officer. And how would they have known that? Well, only if Pakistan intelligence informed them of this. And it's a dangerous combination that Tarek Fatah is advocating for. But the idea that Ankit Sharma was stabbed 400 times, anyhow, that has been completely debunked as false news. Yes, he was stabbed multiple times, but 400 times, no, he was not.
क्या ये मुमकिन नहीं है कि ये पाकिस्तान की आईएसआई का कोई आदमी हो जिसने आइडेंटिफाई किया हो कि वो देखो वो है बंदा उसको मारे?
So that's where Tarek Fatah actually makes it more explicit that it was the Pakistan ISI, the Pakistan intelligence services, that played a role in the killing of Ankit Sharma. And again, this is going to just inflame and incite even more right-wing Hindu hatred towards the Muslim minority in India.
क्या ये पता चले कि उस बच्चे का कसूर क्या था जिसको आपने मारा? बाकी कई लोग 26, 28, 30 लोग मर गए हैं. हर एक के घर में परेशानी है. पूरा अंदाज़ा है मुझे. हर एक के साथ दिल धड़कता है. कोई भी हिंदुस्तानी मर जाए, ये हिंदुस्तान की मौत होती है. ख़ास तौर पे एक ऐसे शहर पे जहां इस कदर जुल्म हो चुका है, तैमूर से लेके आप बताइए कौन.
Tariq Fatah attempts on the one hand to sound very fair and moderate. He says that, look, when Indians are killed, it's a tragedy for India. In other words, he's saying it doesn't matter whether the people killed were Hindus and Muslims. Of course, it wouldn't matter to him in this case when the majority of the people, when at least 40 out of the 53 people killed were Muslims. In this case, the religious identity of the main body of victims doesn't matter to Tarek Fatah, but fine, he's trying to be secular and he's saying, look, if an Indian gets killed unjustly, that's a national tragedy for all of India. But then he immediately proceeds after that to throw more oil on the fire. I should say he's throwing more oil on burning Muslims at this point. He does this by saying that, look, Delhi has seen a lot of turmoil in the past. It's seen a lot of tragedies, a lot of chaos, and a lot of anarchy in the past as well too. And so he jumps back to the 14th century and he mentions Taimur. Taimur was Tamerlane, who was a Central Asian, Mongol, nominally Muslim leader who invaded Delhi, and in the tradition of his non-Muslim Mongol hero Genghis Khan, he leveled Delhi completely, slaughtered inhabitants, Muslims and Hindus. But the problem here is, why would Tarek Fatah bring up Tamerlane? Like, who at this point is thinking of Tamerlane? When you think of the Delhi riots, when you hear or read about the Delhi riots in India, who is going back to the 14th century and thinking about Tamerlane? So Tarek Fatah just kind of innocently drops the name of Taimur, mentioning this Muslim leader, in other words, this Islamic invader who came in and leveled Delhi and killed so many people. Now, even if we were going to bring up Tamerlane, it's actually insignificant to what's going on right now, because speaking about Tamerlane would be a good time to be secular, because we know that Tamerlane was nominally Muslim, and when he invaded Delhi, he was invading a Muslim kingdom. At that time, Delhi was a Muslim kingdom ruled by the Tughlaq dynasty, And so Tamerlane was fighting another Muslim king, invading and looting another city which was a Muslim city at the time. But Tariq Fatah innocently drops the name of Taimur, knowing full well that in the BJP ruled India of today, Taimur is going to be reinterpreted as an Islamic invader who is coming in to kill Hindus, and that is going to be viewed through a sectarian religious lens, when in fact that was not mainly the case. In fact, isn't it interesting that Tariq Fatah is willing to go back to the 14th century and not the 19th century, which is much more recent in Indian history? Why doesn't Tariq Fatah mention the leveling of Delhi that was done by the British in 1857 during the Indian Mutiny, which the Indians themselves refer to as the First War of Independence? The first Indian War of Independence, which was against the British, it actually had a symbolic Muslim leader, because it was the Mughal emperor of the time, the Muslim Mughal emperor of the time, Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was made the symbolic leader of that revolt by Muslims and Hindus alike. So it's very strange that Tariq Fatah goes back to the 14th century and drops the name of Taimur and says nothing about the more recent tragedy, relatively speaking, the more recent tragedy that Delhi suffered in 1857, when tens of thousands of Indians, Muslims and Hindus, were massacred, killed, shot from British cannons. Tens of thousands of more Indians went completely missing. But Tariq Fatah has nothing here to say about the British colonialist rule, because the dog, after all, doesn't bark at the master. Tariq Fatah then continues to make a bunch of irrelevant points. He makes a bunch of errors which are not that significant for me to show you the footage. But he mentions, for example, that Hindus only have one country, and that is India, whereas Muslims have many other countries. Well, technically, there's Nepal, and in Nepal, Hindus are also the majority. I believe they form about 78% of the population in Nepal. And in Mauritius also, Hindus form the largest religious group. Tariq Fatah also grasps at straws. He drops the name of Sadiq Khan, who is the Pakistani British mayor of London in England. And then he talks about Muslims wanting to impose Sharia. How Sadiq Khan is imposing Sharia in London, England, is beyond me. But these are the kinds of moronic points that Tariq Fatah makes. We're not going to spend too much time on that. Let's move on to what Tariq Fatah has to say about Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
मुसलमानों से कहूँगा, अब तो बाज आ जाओ, मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना की तस्वीर हटाओ अलीगढ़ से, और वो ही मैसेज होगा जब हिंदुस्तान का हिंदू समझेगा कि हिंदुस्तान का मुसलमान हिंदुस्तान से प्यार करता है, सिर्फ ज़बानी खर्च में नहीं, एक्शन में.
This is a very dangerous polemic that Tariq Fatah is repeating here. Tariq Fatah has to realize that he's not doing this in Canada any longer. In India, he is now in the major league of Islamophobia. He is in the major league of xenophobia. And his words are not just poisonous and venomous. They can prove to further endanger Muslim lives. He's playing games with Muslim lives by talking like this. So what Fatah says here is that Muslims have to basically start behaving themselves, and they should take down the portrait of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, which is there at Aligarh University, which is a Muslim university in India. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the founder of Pakistan and the first leader of Pakistan. So Tariq Fatah is saying, why would you have the portrait of the first leader of Pakistan in a Muslim university which is in India, when we know that Pakistan and India are arch enemies? And the answer to that is very simple. The students or the faculty or the staff of Aligarh Muslim University are not celebrating Muhammad Ali Jinnah as Qaid-e-Azam. They are not celebrating him as the founder of the Pakistani state. In fact, the reason that Indian Muslims stayed in India is because they didn't want to join Pakistan. If anything, they have made a willful decision and choice to remain in India and to be Indians. The reason that there's a portrait of Muhammad Ali Jinnah in Aligarh University is because there's a portrait not only of him, but of all of the Muslim leaders and speakers of the past who were accorded lifetime membership of Aligarh University. So back in the 1930s, when Muhammad Ali Jinnah was part of the Muslim League, and they had not even yet made a call for a separate Muslim homeland of Pakistan, back when Muhammad Ali Jinnah was simply an independence leader for India, along with Mahatma Gandhi, along with Nehru, at that point, He was honored and he was accorded a lifetime membership at Aligarh University. And the way Tariq Fatah makes it sound is as if, you walk into Aligarh University and there's this large portrait of Muhammad Ali Jinnah celebrating him. It's not one special large portrait. Muhammad Ali Jinnah's portrait stands alongside the portraits of other Indian independence leaders. So this is simply commemorating part of Aligarh Muslim University history. This is commemorating part of Indian history. I mean, in the United States, there are history museums, there are art museums that house portraits of Jefferson Davis, who was the first president of the Confederate States of America. In other words, Jefferson Davis led the Southern War against the Northern states during the U.S. Civil War, in which nearly 1 million Americans were killed. And yet today in the United States, even in the Northern states, there are history museums that house portraits of Jefferson Davis because that's part of history. And a democracy, a liberal democracy, is supposed to be politically mature enough to look at history in an objective way. And having a portrait of Jefferson Davis doesn't mean that you support slavery or that you're celebrating the U.S. Civil War or that you're celebrating that 800,000 Americans were killed in that Civil War. It's simply preserving history.
हिंदुस्तान से बेहतर मुल्क मुसलमानों के लिए इस धरती में नहीं है. सिर्फ यहीं आप वोट डाल सकते हैं और किसी मुस्लिम मुल्क में वोट डालने की इजाज़त नहीं है.
Here Tariq Fatah makes the really, in my opinion, ridiculous claim that there's no better country on the planet for Muslims to live in other than India. India, where recently in 2020, at least 40 Muslims were killed. Hundreds of Muslim businesses and homes were damaged and set on fire. That India is the best country on the planet for Muslims to live in. India, in which in the 1993 Bombay riots, at least 800 Muslims were killed. That India, that's the best country on the planet for Muslims to live in. India, in which in the 2002 Gujarat riots, another 800 to 900 Muslims were mercilessly killed. That India is the best country on the planet for Muslims to live in. Kashmir, in which in the past 2 decades, about 40,000 Muslims have been killed. And yes, many Hindus have been killed as well too. Many Kashmiri Pandits have been killed too. That India, according to Tariq Fatah, that is the best country on the planet for Muslims to live in. That is a laughable claim. Even most Hindus would probably not make that claim. And if Fatah truly believes that, then he should renounce his Canadian citizenship. He's probably already renounced his Pakistani citizenship. I don't know about that, because ironically, Tariq is actually from Pakistan. But he should renounce his Canadian citizenship, and he should permanently, full-time, move over to India if he actually himself believes what he just said. That means that even after the BJP government rolls out a red welcoming carpet to Tariq Fatah, he is not comfortable enough, he is not secure enough to move to India full-time. Also, Tariq Fatah's claim that Muslims are not allowed to vote in any Muslim country, I'm not going to even bother to do a rebuttal of that. I'll leave you to investigate the facts and see for yourself the fact that Muslims vote in many Muslim countries. Moreover, why compare Muslim countries to India? India is a majority non-Muslim country. Why not compare it to other non-Muslim countries like France, like Germany, like Canada, like the United States? So there's many other non-Muslim countries in which Muslims also vote. To claim that India is unique in this respect is to make a very bizarre claim.
You will remain an outsider till you embrace the local culture, its terminology, its name, everything. We haven't done so. Most of us act as if we are Arabs. The Sayyids, the Zaydis, the Naqvis. When your name says you're not Indian, how can you be an Indian? When your name says you're actually an Arab.
In the long list of absurd statements that Tariq Fatah makes, this has to rate as one of the top ones. Here Tariq Fatah says that if you have an Arab name, which most Muslims happen to have, most Muslims have Arab names, some have Persian names or Turkic names. He says if you have an Arab name, what you're basically saying is that you're an Arab, you're not a true Indian. And let's look at how consistently Tariq Fatah applies this standard. Would he back in Canada tell Hindus that they have to change their name from Sharma and Gupta and other Hindu names to more anglicized Canadian names? Would he say that? Would Tariq Fatah tell the Sikh Defense Minister of Canada that he should change his name from an Indian Sikh name to a more anglicized English Canadian name? Better yet, would he tell white Canadians, both English Canadians and French Canadians, that they should change their names to indigenous native Indian sounding names? Within India itself, would Tariq Fatah go to Goa state and tell the Goan Christians that they have to change their names from English sounding or Portuguese sounding Christian names, change them to Indian Sanskrit names? If he doesn't do that, or if he's not willing to do that, that actually proves my point that Tariq Fatah is anti-Muslim, he's anti-Islam, and like any Hindu nationalist extremist, he too is targeting, he is profiling and targeting Muslims and actually throwing oil on sectarian flames. He's throwing oil on the fire. Far from being a well-wisher of Muslims, he is actually trying to hurt Muslims by the irresponsible, reckless political statements that he's making. If Tariq Fatah had his way, we shouldn't even be Muslim in name, because we should change our names to Hindu names, which Tariq Fatah himself has not done yet. Would he say that the boxer Muhammad Ali was not American enough because he had an Arab name? Would he say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the US basketball player, is not American enough because he has an Arab name? In fact, according to Tariq Fatah, Barack Hussein Obama wasn't American enough despite being president of the United States because he had an Arab middle name. The strangest thing about this whole claim is that Tariq Fatah himself has an Arab name. Both Tariq and Fatah are Arab names. And most likely, Tariq was probably named after the Umayyad commander Tariq bin Ziyad, who was the Arab Umayyad army commander who conquered Gibraltar for the Muslims. And it's after Tariq that Gibraltar is named Jabal Tariq, which means, the rock or the mountain of Tariq. So not only does Tariq Fatah have a Muslim name, he has an Arab name, he has a very Umayyad name, and by his own standards, he has a radical Islamist name because he's named after one of these Muslim jihadists who went out of Arabia and conquered other lands. So Tariq, you should show by example and change your name to a Hindu name because you would be more deserving of that. You should change your name to Sharma or to Gupta or to Goldberg or something which is more fitting than the name Tariq.
How can you integrate with India? So here's my message to fellow Muslims in India. For heaven's sake, take down the photograph of Muhammad Ali Jinnah at Aligarh Muslim University. Break it up into 100 pieces.
Here is a better picture of that portrait of Muhammad Ali Jinnah at Aligarh University, which shows you the part that Tariq Fatah didn't show you, which is that Muhammad Ali Jinnah's portrait is right next to a portrait of Nehru. You see, showing Muhammad Ali Jinnah's portrait next to Nehru because they were friends and allies for a time in the 1930s. They had a common cause against the British Empire in India. Showing those two portraits together would have sent out a message that Tariq Fatah doesn't want to send out. By showing only the portrait of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, this is meant again to incite the feelings and the sensitivities of the Hindu majority who are going to look at this and they're going to think, oh, Aligarh Muslim University is celebrating the portrait of the founder of Pakistan, and therefore these guys are unpatriotic and they can't be trusted.
Forward and embrace a civilization that is 10,000 years old, that has seen hundreds of millions of people come and go and benefit. People who invented chess deserve your respect. People who slaughtered the family of Prophet Muhammad do not.
I know from Tariq Fatah's other videos and writings that he has a special hatred for the Umayyad dynasty, which was one of the first, or arguably the first Arab Muslim dynasty. And what's ironic here is that Tariq was most likely named after Tariq bin Ziyad, because Tariq bin Ziyad is the most famous Tariq that I know of in history. And he was not only Muslim, he was not only Arab, but he was an Umayyad army commander who led the conquest of Gibraltar. The reference to chess, again, it's a small, insignificant, bizarre thing. But the irony is that the Umayyad Muslims actually played a role in transmitting the game of chess from India to the rest of the world. So he's mentioning chess in a good light, and then he's mentioning the Umayyads in a negative light. But it was Umayyad Arab Muslims who played a role in transmitting chess and making it known to the rest of the world.
Don't behave like the Umayyads of Damascus. India was a place where the family of Prophet Muhammad, the progeny, took refuge in a Hindu kingdom. The first mosque in the world is in Malabar, in South India.
Tariq Fatah always plays very fast and loose with the facts. He's saying that the first mosque in the world is in Kerala in South India. Now, while this mosque is an example of a very, very early mosque, it goes back to the time of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But to claim that it's the first mosque in the world, you can only claim that if you believe that perhaps Islam originated in India. I mean, what happened to Masjid Haram in Makkah? What happened to Masjid Nabawi in Medina? And several other early mosques in Arabia. What happened to all of that?
For heaven's sake, just because not a single Mughal ever went for Hajj or visited that mosque or ever expressed gratitude for what Raja Dahir did and gave his own life to save a few Muslims.
Raja Dahir was, I believe, a 7th century or an 8th century South Indian king. But what Fatah means by Raja Dahir giving his life to save the life of a few Muslims, at this point, I don't even know what he's talking about. You might know better than me, so you can leave it in the comments. I'm happy to read. I'm happy to learn. I think he's just talking nonsense personally. The main gist of this video is that Tariq Fatah has made a bunch of reckless, irresponsible, dangerous statements that actually endanger the lives of Muslims in India.
ये सुन के कुछ थोड़ी सी तौबा कर लीजिए और कुछ दोस्ती का हाथ बढ़ाइए और अपने बच्चों के नाम हिंदुस्तानी रखिए, ये ना कि हर कोई अरब है यहाँ, क्योंकि हम अरब नहीं हैं, हम हिंदुस्तानी हैं। जय हिंद।
He ends by saying that, remember, we are not Arabs, as if Indian Muslims need Tariq Fatah to remind them that they're not Arabs. This is called a straw man. He's actually implanting the idea in a very subtle way in the minds of Hindus that, Indian Muslims are not real Indians. They're Arabs and they think of themselves as Arabs. And he concludes by saying, Hum Hindustani hai, we are Indians. And as with everything else Tariq Fatah says, it is not factual. It is inaccurate, it is incorrect, because Indian Muslims may be Indian, but Tariq Fatah is not Indian. He is not Hindustani. He is Pakistani. He is Pakistani Canadian. He might be just Canadian, but as far as I know, he doesn't have Indian citizenship just yet. Thank you for watching. Please leave your comments where you agree, where you disagree. Remember also to subscribe and to press on that notification bell, and also to like the video. I'll see you the next time. Assalamu alaikum.